Hey everyone, welcome back to another Arma Reforger deep dive. Today we're going to be covering destruction within 1.3. So we're going to cover all the different destruction updates that have happened. So in my last video we did a deep dive covering pretty much all things 1.3. That build was on 1.3.0.38. This one is on 1.3.0.55, and there have been some very positive changes in the aspects of destruction. So we're pretty much going to cover all the things destructible in 1.3. That includes buildings. We're going to try taking them out with different mortars. I had a viewer on the last video comment that they wanted to see if fortifications made a difference. We're going to cover that in this video as well. And then at the very end, we'll kind of discuss what the developers have come out and said about destruction specifically, what its plans are, how much further it's going to be developed, and basically just do our own little analysis at the very end of the video. So with that, we're going to just go ahead and jump into it and start seeing what the new changes are with the building destruction specifically. Alright, so we're here in the town of Montignac, and what we want to focus on here first is just going through all the different buildings here. We'll also do a coastal city. I'm going to try to cover as many building types as I can here just to see if there's any variants, but we're going to use a single mortar shell and then just kind of count how many mortar shells it takes to kind of do the destruction animation for all the different types of buildings and see if there's a variance with the larger buildings, which there should be, versus smaller buildings and like a deer stand, for example. So in the previous version of 1.3.038, as you saw if you watched my video, a single mortar shell would basically take out all of these buildings. So like one for the church, one for any of these houses here, just one. One was the count, it would go down. Even the power plant, which is a massive building, one mortar shell, it was gone. So let's go ahead and just walk our way through these buildings, do single mortar shell at the time, and we're going to be dropping these directly on the roof, so direct impact, and to just see if there's a variance in the destruction or damage. Alright, so I kind of want to start with smaller buildings and kind of work our way up. I think that'd be a good way to test this, including the walls here. So we'll hit the walls, we'll hit these all of these smaller buildings here, and then while we're here, we're going to go ahead and put up a deer stand as well, because I think the deer stands would be further down on the map, but we might as well put it here. So there's our deer stand, and we're going to go ahead and start with the small. Well, I guess let's start with the wall here. We'll do one shell. Fair enough. One for one. Move up to this little wooden shed. One for one. Okay, fair enough. One for one. So the deer stand. Okay, one for one greenhouse. I would expect this to be one. Yeah, the greenhouse just kind of disappears, so that's pretty funny. I don't know if these have destructible effects. Let's see. I don't think so. Alright, so... yeah, okay. That's fine. Alright, let's move up to a bigger wooden shed. My guess is going to be one hit. Yeah, one hit. You can see the trees going down there. Now let's move to something a little bit bigger, like a barn. One. Two. Three. Four. Five. Six. 6 shots to take that building down, assuming this will also go down. Yeah, okay. Okay, so that's the barn building. Let's do both of these. I would argue that these are roughly kind of the same size. This one's just taller, this one's longer. Okay, so that's 6. That's 7. Let's try this one. So that's 7. That's 8. Okay, so there's a difference right there. Interesting that we have the tree kind of pulling itself like it's tied to that. So that's what I would say we're pretty close in size of buildings. Let's try something a little larger, like an industrial building like this. Okay, that is 8. There we go, a bit larger building. I still think it's interesting that trees get pulled down with it, so I would like to see that be different, you know, or just have the trees destroyed on their own. Not sure if that's intentional or a bug. Okay, so that's a bit of a larger building. Let's see. I'm assuming it's by size and not building like type in terms of structure, like for example the fire station here. Done? Yes it is. Okay, so that's 8 for the fire station. So it doesn't seem like it's necessarily building size. It seems like depending on the structure itself, right? Like wooden shed-like structures that we destroyed over there, like these, albeit they're small, come down pretty easily. And then something that's a little more sturdy, like a fire station, takes a bit more. So it seems like depending on the building type, it seems to be somewhere around 6, 7, 8. 1 for the smaller structures. Let's see for the church here. I hate when this happens in GM. Okay, so this, let's see how many it will take. Let's see if it's going to max at 8 or if it'll be more. See, now that's something I didn't expect, right? That was 3 strikes. So 3 strikes for the church to go down seems a bit odd, because if we're, or at least my initial theory was right, like the larger the building, the more it's going to take to go down. But the church being, I would argue, the largest building here, just went down in 3 strikes. I wonder if it's randomized. So to address that theory, I'm just going to go ahead and give a fresh world. So we're going to start over here. And so I'm just going to restart completely. We'll go back to Montignac, and then I want to try hitting the church again. We said that it was 3 strikes, or we saw rather that it was 3 strikes before. Let's see how many strikes it's going to be now. Okay, and so just to be clear, weather has nothing to do with the building integrity, it's just for the sake of it being easy to see. So the church was 3, let's see how many it is now. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so that should rule out random chance. Of course, if you have studied statistics or probability, you could have just hit a double roll there, but I highly doubt that. So that is interesting. It's 3 on the church, and then we saw like more cement-like structures like this, even though the church really is cement too, take many more hits than that. So that's interesting. I think we're moving in the right direction. It's an improvement, because remember, all this used to be one shot before. But I think the tweaking still needs some more tweaking. That being said, let's check out some of the industrial stuff, like the farm over here. This is a pretty large building. Let's see how many this would take. So that 7th one wasn't necessary there. That was 6. It's just I didn't get an audible cue. So 6 to take that out. And again, if we're just judging by size, that's right. This is pretty large. Let's say the tower. I don't know if I can necessarily put this on top. So 3 for a water tower seems reasonable for me. Maybe even too much. Like, honestly, for a water tower, I'd be fine with like maybe 1 or 2. I would imagine striking something like that, it would disappear, right? Let's see. We've got these silos here. 1, right? That seems reasonable. Or water tanks, I would say. Those aren't really silos. What about the metal roof building here? So this is a barn. That's 7. That's 8. That's 9. 10. 11. 12. Wow. So, that's interesting. 12 hits is a lot. I don't even know how to comment on that, because why would that take 12? Like, I don't know. Now, is it just metal roofs are more resilient or something? Here's a smaller one, let's see. No, so that one was 1. See, like, I'm okay with that. But that took quite a bit. So that's interesting. I don't know necessarily how they're calculating damage values. I would assume that the building types have a tied damage value, right? Like, this isn't the only farm building around here, or farm, I forget what you would call it. I mean, this whole area is a farm, right? But this, if you're a farmer, it'd be good to hear what this is called. I want to say barracks, like barracks for animals. But I'm close. I promise you I'm close. I'm just blanking on the word right now. But, like, these should be the same. You know, these types of buildings should be the same. The, whatever you call it, like water tanks should be the same. That metal barn should be the same, etc., etc. So to test that theory, we're going to find 2 buildings that are exactly the same. So I'm going to teleport myself somewhere else. Alright, so we have 2 buildings here that are exactly the same. Let's see if it's going to be the same amount of hits for both. So 3 on the left, and you can see the damage is happening on the right as well, so 3 on the right. So yeah, I think it's just by building type. Like, the building types themselves have a specific health bar set to them, and again, those are pretty large and what I would think structurally sound buildings. Seems a little odd that they go down in 3 hits, which is a little interesting to me. You know, just while we're here, let's see what this would be like. So 5 on the medical building there. Interesting. Okay, let's try some of the coastal cities, because there's different types of buildings. Let's go to St. Pierre here. Let's try the cranes out. Okay, so as we just saw there, once we got past 30, I just kind of gave up. I know that the crane, I have a recorded instance of it going down in 1 hit on the previous one. Again, everything was 1 hit, but that is like, I don't think they're destructible anymore. So it seems like crane destruction has gone away. Like, I know they have the animation for it, so I wonder if it's just been temporarily removed, or maybe the health bar has just been tweaked to some insane limit. But I kind of wish the crane destruction would come back, because just because they're metal and very strong, I feel like they should still be able to be taken out, albeit I think the health should be pretty high for them. Because if you think about it, this whole place, if it were to get struck really hard or have like a combat scenario, these are kind of be the only things left. I know the animation was like fairly simple for them, they just kind of sink into the ground, but I still think if you're going to go with destruction, then you might as well just go in all the way. So I'm kind of glad we checked and tested that. I don't think these are destructible. Yeah, okay, so I thought. So those aren't destructible. Are the towers destructible? Yeah, they are. Okay, so those are 1 shot, that's reasonable. What about the lighthouse-esque tower? Yeah, 1 shot, that's fine. What about the buoys? I like the sound. That's a pretty cool sound. Probably just like the crane not destructible. I'm not too mad about that not being destructible. I don't really see anybody being out there unless you... I guess you're safe to camp out there if that's what you so desire. In terms of other coastal stuff, I don't think there's anything else here that's mainly different from any of the other buildings. Let's see, gas stations. Yeah, so one on the gas station still. Did they do anything about the tanker? The tank, rather. Nothing on the tank. What about the power lines? I know electricity is something that I'm really excited for. But that's coming way later down the roadmap, but it doesn't look like... Yeah, it doesn't look like towers. So no on the electricity towers. What about the power plants? Doesn't seem like it. Nope. Okay. What about the beloved lighthouse? That's 9 on the lighthouse. That seems... I don't know, you guys decide. Do you think that's reasonable? I think that covers most of the building types. Now, the one thing I wanted to test was different churches and see if they're all consistent. So this one is smaller than the one that we saw in Montiac, but let's see how many this takes. So Montiac's church took 3. So 6. So like, I guess that's what I'm trying to get at is like, I don't think it necessarily means that a bigger building better type of deal, right? Like bigger building, more health. I mean, I think that's a goofy assumption because just because it's bigger doesn't mean it's stronger. But it is interesting that that one's like at 6 and then the bigger church is at 3. Yeah, so let me quickly scan over. I'm going to go to the airport next because that's going to have some different-esque buildings there. So like the ATC building and then the Evron Airport building. Let's see how many that takes. So 12 on the hangar. On the ATC tower. I think that's the highest we've seen so far. So that's interesting. Okay. Obviously we're not going to go through and test every single type of building. I think that's a pretty big variety as is. The next thing we're going to move to, since we're here in an open space on the airfield, is player built compositions. So I'm just going to go ahead and build that out really quickly. And then we're going to go ahead and test through those to see how many hits it takes to take out compositions, if possible at all. Alright, so we're just going to move down the list of player compositions here. So we're starting off here with the bunker. That's 1. Alright, so we're letting the dust settle there a little bit. It looks like the bunker itself has survived most of the shelling, but sandbags, and I'll have to say it, the animation for that looks pretty neat. The sandbags kind of explode. It definitely has a different explosion effect in the sense that the sandbag animation, it basically flings sand everywhere when it gets struck, so I think that's pretty cool. We'll explore sandbags a little bit later and those destructive effects, but if it's a bunker like this, then it's pretty secure in terms of the bunker itself. I'm sure those shells will kill you, even if you're inside. To test that, let's go ahead and pop a volunteer in here. Thanks for volunteering. Mr. Edward Clark, he's a cat lover. That makes me sad, because I have a cat. Let's see. Yeah, Edward is dipping out of there. I don't think that's a good idea, Edward. Yeah, probably should have stayed in cover, but nonetheless. Okay, so we got a defensive position down here, so let's go ahead and rip at it. So yeah, you can see there, anything sandbags, it's getting torn apart. So like the position itself will stay, but it definitely gets ripped up apart. So that brings us to a defensive position with like a peeking port. There we go, so we got the barbed wire blown off. So you can see the dragon's teeth crumble apart there. And basically what's happening is as these sandbags are exploding, it's just leaving a mound of sand behind. So I guess you technically would still have cover because this will still be here. But you know, your built sandbags would be gone. So I'm starting to see a trend here. Anything with sandbags is pretty much getting messed up, which makes me believe that this is likely going to suffer the same fate. Yep, and the motors themselves are destructible, so you can pretty much take out someone's motor emplacement if you hit it with motors itself. The machine gun nest, I'm going to assume is going to be the same exact thing. I'm kind of curious to see if the gun is going to survive, so I'm just going to wail at this. So yeah, it seems like the gun itself is not destructible. You're going to lose all your sandbags. So I think what I would like to see here is, like, you see the chair, for example, that's just kind of chilling. Right? I mean, it gets dirty if I hit it, but it's just sitting there. You've got a chair made of titanium. And the gun itself. So, like, the reason I'm bringing this up, and I guess this doesn't matter from a defensive standpoint, because you've obviously lost this point. Like, this is another thing that I think needs to have an animation, which it probably will at some point. I mean, we can see the shell kind of hit the netting, but I don't know what this netting is made out of, if it survives that. I think the netting needs a destruction, and you can see right there it just got cleared, so that was the shell itself that left the imprint. But I think the netting needs a destruction, especially like this netting. It would be kind of cool if it tore through it as it kind of blew up. But stuff like this, like the gun, right? Like, I can still mount up on this, right? And I can shoot. And, like, it's floating, right? So I guess from an immersive standpoint, I think if you're going to have the sandbag destruction, and again, they might have planned this already, and if they did, that's awesome. But my feedback here would be, for these types of, you know, emplacements and stuff, I like the fact that the sandbags explode. I like the fact that the sand is left. But the netting, the bushes, all that, I think that also needs to be destructible. And it could be something simple, right? Like, you can just kind of have it collapse. It doesn't have to be a big animation. I know I'm definitely, you know, animating things is a lot harder than just what I'm saying. So, you know, I understand that that can be difficult. But even if they just get deleted when they get hit, I think that's fine. It's just so that for the sake of this being more destroyed or whatever, that's better. And I'm sure that's on the roadmap, but we'll revisit that later. So let's go ahead and keep moving. We've got a heavy vehicle maintenance point here, so we're just gonna start tagging it. Looks like some of the debris and tools and whatever get destroyed here. The real question is, well, let's try hitting the board and seeing if it deactivates the point. Yeah, no. Can still request vehicles, right? That hasn't done anything. Okay. So it doesn't destroy the point. It does destroy some of the artifacts there. but it doesn't seem to destroy the point itself. I would suspect if that's the case with the large one, it's going to be the exact same thing with the small one, but for the sake of completion, let's go ahead and do it. Yeah, the fact that I can still see the board, it's going to work. So let's go to a supply point. Okay, so that's cool. So the supply point gets destroyed. Does it stop it from being utilized? Nope. So, could still open it. Now, I didn't have this load of supplies beforehand. I can obviously interact with the arsenals here. So let me try dropping a supply point. But what I'm going to do is fill it with supplies, then destroy it. And let's see if it will get rid of the supply count there. I would imagine it should. Alright, through the magic of editing, what I've done is I drove a truck over here, more or less spawned it, put it full of supplies, and loaded 1,500 worth of supplies in here, so you can see the boxes are in there. We got our buddy here, John Johnson, who's a vegetarian. Interesting name, Mr. John Johnson. And now we're going to shell it. RIP to our vegetarian friend there. But we're going to see. So I can still see the supplies here. Let's go ahead and open that up. I didn't mean to jump over that. Thank you, buddy. Still 1,500 supplies. So shelling it will destroy the structure, but it doesn't destroy the supplies, which I think is a little goofy. I do like the destroyed look of this. I think this looks good. But I think if you're going to shell and destroy a supply point, considering that this would likely be ammunition, grenades, munitions, and stuff, as you can see here, it says explosive. I think this should either like catch on fire or whatever. And what's interesting here is that we do have this animation, right? So like if I put supplies in a truck, so let's take our truck here, we're going to pop it to 100 supplies, right? So you can see them. Okay. And let me think of what the best way to do this without kind of blowing it up in one shot would be... Actually, no, we can do this. Watch. So if I set this thing on fire, you see how the supplies are actually cooking off right there? You can hear them. And they have their own little flame. And so, I'm sure some people already know this, but for example, if I get close to this, because it's cooking off and stuff, I'll actually take damage, right? So I'm taking damage, and I'm not even like right on the fire. Yeah, sorry, bud. All that to say, like, we have the animation right here. Like, I would be perfectly okay with this animation being carried over into this, and since we're about to have this explode, I kind of want to show you this as well. So when there is ammo in a supply truck and it's cooking off and it's going to blow up, the area of effect of explosion is much larger than if it was just the truck itself. So this should wipe pretty much all these guys here once it blows. And you can see the supplies are dwindling as well because they're burning down. And we're almost there. 13, 12. It's a nice countdown. It's like a New Year's countdown. Minus the surprise at the end. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And so yeah, you see how big the smoke cloud is, the plume, and the area of effect of damage? My point is, we have that, right? Like that animation, all that's baked in for the supplies in the truck. Why can't we have that for the supply point? Right? Like, that's what I would like to see. I want to see the supply point go up in flames. I want it to have a huge explosion, so there's an actual consequence. And furthermore, what would be really cool is if it was burning, give me the, the ability to extinguish the fire. Like, I don't think that's reasonable now that I'm thinking about it. I mean, if this stuff was burning, like, I'll be honest with you, I don't know anybody in their right mind who would come in there with a fire extinguisher and try to put that out. But, I mean, maybe that's a little too far, but the point is, like, can we have that kind of effect for the supply point? That's what I would like to see. And I'm sure people in the comments would agree. Whether or not you do, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. That being said, we're going to keep moving. So we got a fuel supply point, a small one at that. See? That's sick. That I approve of. One hit, blows up, big old plume. That I like to see. That I like to see. Now, I would assume that if I were to take a truck here or something, I'm not going to be able to refuel it, which would be perfectly reasonable. So, let's see, open, where's the fuel point on the UAZ? There it is, refuel. Yeah, well, there's nothing to fuel, so good. That I approve of. That, I like that animation. That looks stellar. That is good. That's the fuel point. Now we've got the command post. Let's see if this is destructible. Another thing that I'm going to do here as well is go ahead and put the supplies as well, just to see if that makes any effect. So yeah, command post seems fine. Looks like we've got a chair that's been knocked over at most, if that's not really knocked over in the base command post. Supplies are still there, unaffected. I don't think, again, like the supply point, there's no animation. For command posts, honestly, they're kind of integral in conflict, so I don't know if they need a destructive effect. I would leer on the side and say no. I know for completion's sake it should, but for the sake of the fact that you could just mortar people's command posts, I feel like that would get abused pretty hard, and it's really hard to protect against that, so I'm okay with this not having a destructive, you know, aspect, because it does have consequences, right? So that's fine. Now the radio towers, let's see if they do. Radio relay stations seem fine. Let's try the living quarters. Ooh. Saw something. So we saw like one of the, you can see it's broken apart here. Now I don't know if it's potentially not usable because of that. Let me see if, one second. Alright, so I'm going to take our buddy here and see, request personnel, 0 supplies available. So it seems like we saw a piece get blown up there, like the little truss. The rest of them are still here, but it's still in effect. It seems like it works just fine, so it seems like living quarters are pretty safe from this level of destruction. Go ahead, delete that guy. Now let's see for the larger living quarter. I would imagine it's going to be the exact same thing, though. We'll see. These have been destructible before, so I'm curious to see whether or not they'll blow up now. Yeah, so these guys have an animation. The supply we already know. Like if I were to edit this right now, I put supplies, they're going to be there. Or not? No, they're there, 100% for supplies. And so let's confirm that. We're going to go ahead and take a troop, put them down. I think this place is still going to be perfectly functional. Request personnel, so we've got 2,000 supplies available. Yeah, so I see I can request like a fire team, etc., etc. Didn't mean to go into that. But still functional. Just the supply point is destroyed. It also seems like once these guys are destroyed, you can't see the supplies if you try to spawn them in afterwards. But the point is the point itself, the building, excuse me, is functional. So there's that. Now the medical field hospitals, at least. Let's see. Are they destructible? Wager a guess and say no, they are still functional and non-destructible, because again, these are really just the same building type, I think, fundamentally as an entity. So yeah, it's just visual destructions on the outside. And last but not least, we've got our helipad, so let's see what this does. Okay, so the fuel is gone, makes sense. pretty big number on our helipad there. Question is, can I request a helicopter? And it seems like if I had supplies here, I could. So what I'm going to do is go back to GM. And we'll give it 100% supplies. Then we'll take control. So yeah, we can request there are supplies there. The question is, I would assume the refuel point is pretty much, you know, it's cooked. Oh, no. Interesting, I can open that. Okay, so what about the arsenal crate? Can I access that? Doesn't seem like I can access that. So I think I want to dive a little more into this helipad. I don't think this is the best test, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press put a fresh one down. Try to refuel the helicopter before and after the station over there blows up, and then also see whether or not supplies can be added to this area, like post and pre, like that, losing that little overhang that's usually there for supplies and stuff. Alright, so at the helipad right now, as you can see, we've got full supplies. We've got Huey down, 1300 at 1300. I can request a helicopter if I needed to, though we've got one here, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to take this guy back. I'm going to run over to refuel it. So you can see, definitely refuel it. And now what I want to do, what was that prompt I got? Now what I want to do is, oh, sorry, I get distracted. I can't really access that, so that makes sense. We can put supplies in, etc., etc. So that's pretty complete. Is I'm going to move the Huey out of here, and then we're going to shell it. And then I want to see, basically, after shelling it, right, like, is it going to, disable the refuel? We already know that there's no real, like, destruction animation for the helipad itself, but I do want to see if it disables it in aspect. This guy's going to walk right onto the helipad. So let's hit it. Alright, so that's the refuel down. That was going to happen. Alright, now, can I still refuel is the question. Cannot refuel. Okay, so that's good. Thanks, buddy. But yeah, so the refuel station's gone. I'm okay with that. Can't refuel anymore, so you've disabled the refueling aspect. Supplies still seem to be here, so if I were to open this, looks like I can still transfer supplies over, so there's that. Again, we have that cook-off animation. I really think we should implement that anywhere there's supplies. We can request a helicopter still, as you can see, 1300 supplies available. Vehicle maintenance, we can still see the supplies. Now the question is, if this is damaged, I wonder if, yeah, see, we can decommission it still too, so that's fine. I'm sure you could repair it as well. I don't know if I've got a repair wrench on this guy. I'm going to get a guy equipped with a wrench. I'm going to hit it. The helipad is still damaged. We're going to see if it allows me to repair it. Alright, so I've got your average Huey here full of bullet holes. And so again, we're still at the same station. Remember, the refuel is blown up. Our buddy here is blown up. This is post-motor strike. And so I've got a wrench in my hand and I want to see, can I repair this? So you can see I can still repair the fuel tank. Cranking the good old hog. Point being, it seems like we can still repair this. And we're utilizing the supplies in this area, right? So, like, despite that we shelled it, we can still repair this area. Or, sorry, repair the Huey at this area. So, I think what I'd like to see here is, like, I still think that the helipad needs to be damaged in strikes. Now, I'm sure I'm going to have mixed opinions on that, but I think helipads, right, like, especially with the rocket Hueys coming, I know a lot of people are saying, like, it's going to become slightly imbalanced. I do have separate comments on that because the Hueys and the MI8s don't have a ton of rockets, and when you reload them, it's like a single reload at a time. It does take a considerable amount of effort to reload them, and they don't carry a lot of ammo. I feel like that's already balanced, so the idea of, you know, air superiority has always been a thing, right? In Battlefield or any game, if you've got good pilots, like, it goes a long way. Air superiority in real life is also a real thing, so I don't have a problem with that. I think that's already balanced. But I do think, like, having the helipad, again, having some of these supplies even blow up or something would be kind of neat to incorporate. Or better yet, like, if you had craters in the helipad or if it was damaged, have the ability for people to repair them with shovels or something. So like the idea of damaged structures, maybe if they're critical structures, you can't necessarily destroy them, right? So like the medical tent, the command post, etc. Like maybe they have reduced capacity. Like if it's a damaged structure, you can't, like spawn, or like the relay stations, for example. This is even a better example, I think. Like this gets damaged, right? Like have the tower like broken or something, or some of these cables, and you either have to go there with a wrench or a shovel. I think a shovel is probably better. Arguably, neither tool really makes sense for this, but whatever. You can use your imagination and have it so that you can repair these, and then it like puts them at capacity, right? So like imagine the radio relay station, heavy damage is like 15% capacity, where like the range is smaller than it usually is. Same with the living quarters, same with the command post, etc., etc. Like the helipad, when they're in a damaged state, there's less you can do with them, but it shouldn't be very hard to repair them. I think that also implements supply logistics to another level. I know the people who are going to be against this are probably the people who play on public servers with like just public, right? Like people, especially on the US side, that's become memed on the Reddit extensively at this point, that US just consumes supplies, right? Like 3 million mags, 3 million bandages just to run out and get shot by a Russian carrying an AK and one mag. Right? They call them a walking arsenal. So like people may not look forward to using supplies to repair buildings. Like maybe that needs to be a bigger discussion, but I feel like it'd be kind of cool for supply logistics, especially if you make like a fob. Let's say we got a fob here, and then there's a fob down there, and then the fob gets damaged. You've got your team has to coordinate, right? It's not just keeping the fob and keeping it safe. It's a matter of repairing it, making a decision on whether or not you want to allocate supplies and repairing it, or you can even get into the mental aspect, right? You build a smaller fob out somewhere to draw your enemy to it and basically damage it ahead of time or something, or not put a lot of supplies in this case and just bait and switch them by putting them somewhere and making them focus their efforts, right? So I think like it could be pretty cool to incorporate a lot of different things with that mechanic. So yeah, that's just food for thought, or at least stuff that I would like to see. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here, but with Soviet structures. If I see a change between the two, I'll include it in the video and tell you like, okay, well in the Soviet side, you can destroy a relay station or whatever. I am about 99.9% sure that the case is going to be that with Soviet, it's going to be the exact same animations, exact same stuff, exact same mechanics, right? So I doubt I'm going to see a change, but if I do, we'll go to that. If I don't, we're going to keep moving down the list. Alright, Bento, moment of truth. So what we've done here is put up a bunch of sandbags. You can't put them up against the wall if you put a construction truck and try to build them yourself, but you can build them pretty close to the structure that you're willing to defend. And so what we're going to do right now is test and see whether or not this will make a difference in the protection of this home. If the shells are landing effectively like outside of the sandbags or even on top of the sandbags, so like somewhere like here, we know if it lands on the inside, it's going to take out the house. But let's see if it makes a difference. We're basically testing sandbag versus no sandbag, so we're just going to do this one by one here. So we've basically taken out all of our sandbags. Now let's see, now that the home doesn't have any sandbags, whether or not it will actually stay or get destroyed. There we go. Yeah, sandbags with it too. I don't know if you saw that. So there you go, there's the answer. It actually does make a difference. So you could argue and say that this specific house, was the sandbags, like, it would have taken more shots than 3. We already damaged it. For the sake of science, I'm going to say that it does make a difference, but to be consistent, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this map coordinate here on this house. I'm going to make a new session, and then basically come to this house again and do the same thing. So that means this house has not been touched. It's a brand new fresh session. And we're going to go ahead and mortar it in the same fashion, albeit with no sandbags now. Okay, so we're at the same house as earlier. I'll close the map here. So you can see same greenhouse, same everything. I'm going to quickly change the time of day so it's a little clearer to see. I've done nothing. This is a fresh world. Everything's still here. And we're going to do the same thing. So again, no sandbags, just to see, for the sake of consistency. And I'm going to drop them. So the sandbag line was about here. Well, we're going to drop it a little further out. We do 3. There you go. So again, 3 from before, after the sandbags were destroyed, right? So the sandbags were taking the damage until they were destroyed. Once they were gone, it took 3 motors on the outer perimeter of the house to take it out. In this case, this is a fresh world, fresh everything, no sandbags, no motors have been struck at this house. 3 motors again, took it out. So Bento, phenomenal suggestion. Yes, short answer, yes, it does make a difference to actually fortify sandbags around homes to protect them. Again, it's not going to protect them from a direct mortar shell hit, but again, you're playing with likelihoods here. The likelihood that it strikes directly on top of the roof versus within the vicinity, you know, is it worth it to spend resources on that? You can decide, but great suggestion. So yes, seeing from what we saw here, fortifications around buildings will actually prolong the inevitable, which is the destruction of the building. Alright, so I think we've done a considerable amount of testing with mortars and building damage, but now I want to test something that is also probably going to happen in-game, and that is whether or not damage from vehicles, such as LAVs, we don't have mods here, so I can't say tanks, but I do want to test that down in the future, like the RHS tanks, like the Armada, but more importantly, now that the Huey gunships are coming in, especially for the people who do play on vanilla, whether or not the Huey gunships themselves will do damage to buildings. So we're going to pick kind of the weakest building here and see what it does. And so remember that one, that type of structure we were able to take out with 1 hit with a mortar. And can confirm with the rockets it does take 1 hit as well. And so we'll go ahead and circle back, pick a bigger building or target here. So let's, the barn, again, we kind of expect that to get destroyed pretty easily. So I would say rocket pods from a Huey should do that. Let's go ahead and pick this house right here. So I kind of just dumped a bunch of rockets into it. That wasn't the best angle. They should have connected, so... Yep, we can see that that house is now flat. I'm pretty sure I'm out of rocket pods, so I'm going to land this thing and rearm. And then we're going to keep moving down those structures here just to see pretty much like what the damage looks like and what we can do with it. Alright, so I've rearmed the Huey. I kind of want to pick a bigger structure right now, so we're going to aim for this yellow house. That's 1, 2... 3 rocket hits. That 4th one wasn't necessary. So 3 rocket hits took that yellow house out right there. So yeah, it is possible to actually take buildings out with rocket pods. So we'll hit this one right here as well. That's 3. And you can hear it's being destroyed. So 3 on that building right there. And now I'm kind of curious because these houses, we know the mortars took various amounts depending on the size of the building. I kind of want to move over to that metal building or some of the industrial gas stations and stuff that we were looking at. Not really gas stations, but like supermarkets. And I'm kind of curious to see how many rocket pods it takes for the Huey to take them out. So I'm going to go ahead and shift myself over there. Alright, so I moved over to the farm here because we did see it took, I believe, 6-7 shots. We can confirm this right now. Roughly to take out these larger buildings. So let's just see real fast. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Like I said, it looked like 11, 12 to take one of those farm buildings. And again, this may or may not be randomized every new session. But we're going to target this farm building here with the Huey and see how many rockets it approximately takes. I kind of want to target that one. I want to target this one. And then we're going to do like a gun run with the MI8 in like a more dense city like this, just to see like what kind of devastation would be from like non-discriminate fire on most of these homes. Like let's say we had the enemy set up the camp in here and you have the other, the other enemies flying in and they just want to take out as many, we'll the ground troops as possible, and in the process of doing that, they hit a bunch of structures, and we're going to see like what lays to waste, because it is going to be interesting to see if air superiority already poses a challenge for ground troops. What kind of challenge it's going to pose when your helicopter pilots from either side can now take out buildings as well. So that being said, let's focus on the Huey for now before we get to the MI8. And then let's just focus our fire on the farm building here, just to see how many hits it's going to take for that to get knocked out. So again, I'm using, because we don't have time to test really everything, HEDP. This should be more effective against vehicles. It's kind of like the combo round. I would imagine it might have more of a damage effect on the buildings itself, but I can't confirm that, so we're just going to roll with that. Alright, so I'm just going to auto hover here and basically rail rockets at it. One. I lied, I can't auto hover. So that's 6, all direct hits. I'm going to do a spin around here. So I think that's 7, and I'm out of rockets. So 7 hits on the building, and it still hasn't been taken out, so I'm going to rearm, and we're just going to continue firing on it. Alright, so I am rearmed. We were at 7 hits total on that building. We're going to keep hitting it. That's 3 more. Which will make it 10. Still standing. Oh, I might have touched the building on that one. That's 13. Yep, 13. So it does seem like it correlates, right? So if it takes more mortar strikes to take it out, the building is tougher. So I think the underlying health is higher. And so as a result, it is also going to take more rockets to take it out. So that's a good sign. But that does confirm that it is possible to take out buildings via Huey, at least with rocket pods. So let's try the MI8 just to get an idea of what kind of some indiscriminate fire in like St. Philippe would look like. So like a more realistic scenario of like a pilot flying over and just wreaking chaos. So I'm going to spawn an MI8, and then we're just going to fly over, dump rocket pods down, and see what happens. Alright, so I've got it on auto. Ripple quantity is set to 4. And so we're just going to rock with that. I'm not going to make too many changes there. It's been a minute since I've flown an MI8, so this is going to be fun. Alright, let's start whaling. And I am out of rockets, so we're just going to go ahead and let this crash into the lighthouse, which brings me to a second point. I am curious to see if crashing will take buildings out. Of course, the MI8 being the tank that it is, totally just tanked that hit. But let's see if what St. Philippe looks like after the ripple attack. So it doesn't seem like any buildings have really been destroyed. So overall, it's not that bad. So I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue unless you have a pilot that's specifically targeting a building, in all honesty. Again, the smaller structures like these wooden barns and stuff, as we saw, will get destroyed really easily. Structures like these seem to take many more hits, but indiscriminate fire like that on the streets and stuff, it seems like overall, at least for the bigger buildings in larger cities like this, you're likely not going to see an effect. And then, of course, as we saw with the mortars, if you tend to fortify certain buildings, which may or may not make you a target, in my opinion, or at least a point of interest, then you should be fine. So I honestly don't think that helis are going to create too much chaos in terms of building destruction. It does beg the question of what we just did right now, like if I were to take a helicopter and make a suicide dive into, one of these weaker structures like those barns and stuff, I'm going to find like, a barn like this or something. Will it destroy the building? Because I'm actually kind of curious to see like it's like the crashing of a vehicle or something. And we're going to try this with a LAV or something. I'm just going to run full speed into one of these barns and see if we can blow them up. Let's say this is our barn of interest. So I'm going to go ahead and spawn a heli down, and we're going to try running into it full speed. And it could just be a regular old transport. And I'm not going to bore you with the takeoff sequence here, so I'm just going to put this here, and then we're going to basically nosedive right into this building and see if it takes it out. Alright, moment of truth. Can you take structures out by just ram speed running into them? Look at the MI8, it's a good test for this. It's a bit of a tank. Heck yeah. So yes, you will do building damage by physically ramming into them. So smaller structures, I would imagine sandbags and stuff, you're probably going to end up taking out if you just ram a Huey in. So to my pilots out there, if you have been critically damaged, then you want to critically damage your enemy and you've got nothing to lose, well, if you're not going to make it back to the repair station and you're going down, you might as well take them with you. Just saying. So with that being said, let's go ahead. I'm going to kind of break away from this area a little bit, and we're going to look at the LAV and some of the other ground Vics. So I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like in terms of building destruction. So we'll do Tyrone here. I'll spawn down a couple of ground Vics and we'll drive around, shoot at them, and see what that damage correlates to. Alright, so I'm in the LAV right now. As you can see, we're facing this barn. I'm going to go ahead and put the most powerful rounds it's got in it. We're going to see if it's going to be able to flatten out this barn. We're going to start with the weak structure. If it can do this one, then we can move up to something larger. If it can't take this out, then there's no point in trying stronger structures, in my opinion. So I'm just going to unload on it. Alright, so it seems like it can destroy the barn, though it took a considerable amount of hits there before it went down. I don't know exactly how many, I wasn't counting. Let's go ahead and try moving to a larger building and see how it behaves. I mean, I guess we could just use, the building right here and then move up. These are technically two larger buildings, so we're just going to go ahead and spawn ourselves a new one. Put 2 guys in it. We'll take the gunner. So the same thing. We're just going to go ahead and turn our sights towards the building here to the right. Alright, so I'm out of ammo. As you can see by all the marks on the building, we've definitely been firing at it. It has not come down yet, so I'm going to switch over. As you can see, no dice either on that building, so it seems like overall damage done to buildings by like ground Vics like this, pretty low. I do want to take control of the driver and just ram into it, see if that does anything. Okay, so nothing. Maybe if we try a bit more speed. So let's try... Oh, move the troops out of it. That's not what we wanted. Let's try getting a more running start here and see if that does anything. Definitely hurt my guy in there, but the building's still standing, so don't think that'll take it out. Now, I do wonder the explosion of it may take it out. I feel like that wasn't a fair test because if lightning is close, yeah, we're gonna count that to lightning. I'm not gonna say that that was the vehicle, but that does bring up a good theory. What if a vehicle blows up next to the house? Would that take it out? So let's go ahead and we'll set this on fire, and I'll time-lapse this so you don't have to watch it burn the whole way. Okay, so from the LAV, it doesn't look like that was enough to blow up the structure. Kind of curious if we were to take a supply truck and put it near. So let's do something like this. Because remember, when these are full of supplies, they definitely have a huge explosion radius, huge AoE. You can kind of see that cook-off we were looking at earlier. So again, I'm going to time-lapse this. We're going to see if that's enough to take out a house. So there you go. If you want to take out a house, just make sure you have a transport truck full of supplies. Now, would you want to do that in a multiplayer scenario? Probably not, because your team is going to be very upset with you if you are using supplies as a means to eliminate enemy structures or buildings like this. So it is pretty neat to see that. I guess the thing we're testing here really is like, do other explosive effects other than mortars take out buildings or do damage to them? And it sounds like yes. From what I can tell, the LAV seems like it does decent damage. Again, these kind of barns and stuff seem to kind of crumble with very little, persuasion. We could try the BRDM. I could try, well, let's, for sake of completion, let's go ahead and throw that down here. So we'll put one here. And then we need some troops. And we just want to make sure we grab the gunner. Turn that puppy around and just unload. So I think because it's not as explosive as LAV, which is kind of why I wanted to use LAV for this test, I don't think it's going to necessarily take this building out. Quite frankly, I don't know if I really want to sit here and reload this many, many times and try to take it out. But here, I'll put 2 mags in for completion's sake. Yeah. I don't know. I think it makes sense. The rounds are much smaller with this thing, so I doubt it's going to do as much building damage. I would assume that's been scaled correctly, so I don't think that will be the case. But it is pretty neat, so you can definitely take out buildings like we saw with vehicles, like explosives near the vehicles and stuff. I think it's going to be the same thing with the sandbags, right? Like if you have an enemy run into like a sandbag, I mean, shoot, why don't we test it? If an enemy runs into a sandbag fortification, will it take out the fortification? I'm willing to bet that it will. So if we put a defensive position like this, and then we take a UAZ like this, or actually, you know what would be a better? Let's say we take a transport van and we crank her with supplies. This is definitely going to take that sandbag out. So I'm struggling to find troops here. Go ahead and hop in the driver's seat. The old Dimitri going for it here. I guess this would be a kind of a realistic scenario, buddies are running supplies back home, and someone put up a barrier like this, so you don't see it in time. Maybe it's nighttime, and you just kind of do one of those. And yeah, my man looks like the meme from Dragon Ball Z when he's like pounding into the ground. Anyway. Yeah, it does take out the sandbags as I figured. So the same thing would apply, right, that we've tested so far. The sandbags, any compositions that do have effects. I will say, if you're this type of player, you could definitely take out fuel support structures. Those seem to go out pretty easily. Matter of fact, I think you could take them out even by shooting them with an LAV or BRDM, but if you really felt like driving a vehicle into someone's base and blowing it up that way in style, more power to you, but I definitely think it's possible. And so I think we've done enough testing to kind of cover most of the damage. If there's something else you'd like me to test, let me know by dropping something in the comments below. But I do want to transition over into kind of what is to come. At least this is what's been announced by the devs through an AMA session. So we're going to switch gears here. Real quickly. All right, so I found the AMA on Reddit that was done by Kalmatz. I'm not entirely sure what your or how to pronounce your name properly, but if you do watch this video, feel free to comment down below and let me know what the actual pronunciation of that is because it would be pretty neat to know. And I hate butchering people's names. So, or if anybody else knows, I would love to know the phonetics behind it. So please do comment that below. But long story short, I went through the AMA here and dug up pretty much all things that were related to destruction. So one thing before jumping into discussion was pretty interesting is the release date. So I know a lot of people in the previous video were commentating like when will 1.3 hit PS5 stable, and PS5 is kind of like the one that gets it last, right? So like if it hits PS5, it should hit the rest of the platforms. And so the comment that we got here was as soon as it's ready, currently aiming at February. We're in February right now, so hopefully 1.3 is posted at some point in this month. That'd be pretty neat. So for people wondering for the answer for that, there you go. But in terms of destruction, there were a couple, actually 5 snippets that I found here that were pretty interesting. So we had Reddit user Moby here ask about the destruction. So I heard a big consensus in the community about destruction being underwhelming. Now I understand the engine limitations and console being the limiting factor, but are there any plans to make destruction more in depth, or is it going to stay as is? And point 4 here says that destruction will mostly stay as is, and the scope of Reforger will not be expanded significantly. Another thing that I found was Incendiary Burp here had asked, are there any plans to develop the building destruction or any terrain destruction for Arma 4, incremental building destruction and terrain scarring, etc.? I understand the difficulties with building interior objects around destruction and also memory issues with the trees for 1.3, so just wondering if this would hinder such features in future releases. The game would be incredibly immersive. A picturesque landscape started to look like the Battle of Ypres over the course of the game. And the answer we got here was no, there are no plans for advanced building destruction in Reforger, also no plans for terrain deformation. It is indeed very challenging technologically from an assets perspective. Got another screenshot here from copyleft 1234. Building destruction questions. Destructible buildings are an experimental branch. Beyond this basic system, can we expect different tiers of building destruction to be available in Reforger? My thoughts, at current, I assume it's tier 1 where it replaces a destroyed building with fixed rubble. Tier 2 would be certain walls could be destroyed, while other parts of the buildings like supports can't be destroyed, with larger explosions destroying the whole building, similar to tier 1. Tier 3 being more like destruction you'd find in the finals, where every piece is physical in the world and the building can dynamically crumble. So I want to say copy left 1, 2, 3, 4. Great question here. I think you covered a lot of things that a lot of the community has been wondering. And the answer we get is what you see is what you get. The tiers you explained sounds great. It may even happen in the future of Arma, but they realistically would require redoing most for existing assets, which is not something we are planning to do. Therefore, there will be one stage of vanilla destruction, the one which you can see in 1.3 experimental. We will be polishing the feature as much as we can, but we don't expect making complete new tiers for buildings. Got another one here being asked by Contanqua87. So specifically on point 2, what is the vision or direction for environmental destruction? For example, partial building destruction, buildings catching fire, grenade craters, etc. We've got the answer here being building destruction as is implemented in 1.3 experimental is first public release. It's supposed to get us back to Arma standard with Moder sound. It says MODER, Moder sound, and particle effects. Any additions to it depends on your feedback and our resources. We have already planned more work on improvements to how destroyed environment looks like. I like the buildings on fire and craters. Thanks for the suggestion. Some of this can be modded, but eventually, maybe. So this kind of contradicts the last thing we just talked about because I know the last person had asked something similar and we basically were told like it's not going to happen. In this case, it sounds like it's kind of on the roadmap. I don't think I guess to clarify, it sounds like the tiered approach that we were talking about, right? Or what the 1, 2, 3, 4 was talking, the user was talking about, right? Of having like the first tier is what we see right now, the second tier being advanced and such. It's not going to happen. So like we're stuck with what we have right now in terms of destruction, but the idea of fires and potential like different particle effects or craters, which would be pretty neat, I think, in the environment. I think craters in the ground would be pretty neat. I don't know how feasible that would be. That could potentially happen. And then the last one I have here is Bullen Sauce asked, will environment building destruction be expanded upon? It looks awesome and experimental right now, but I'm hoping that parts of buildings can be destroyed instead of the whole building in the future. And the answer here is we call the suggestion advanced building destruction, but it will not happen in Reforger. Basically insinuating that it's likely going to happen in Arma 4. So what we can take from all of these is essentially that so what we can take from all of this is essentially that we're pretty much stuck with the animations we have right now in terms of destruction within Reforger. Um, Honestly, it sounds like overall what we're seeing right now, where the whole building kind of collapses into one big rubble piece, they're not going to be redoing those animations or adding future animations or different forms or tiers of animations to that. It sounds like we might get improvements in particle effects, enhancements, of course, optimizations. I know one thing the BI is working really heavily on is optimizing the game so that the smoke effects, everything that's blowing up, etc., doesn't necessarily take out console users, such as PS5 and Xbox. Both are equally at risk here. So I know that it's a big focus for them. There were issues, I know they were discussed in trees specifically, as were briefly mentioned here, that the trees collapsing and blowing up were causing issues with memory run out and stuff, which makes sense. So I'm sure they're focusing in on more of an optimization perspective, and I think that what we have so far is already pretty impressive given the limitations of all platforms, because it's not, Arma was always traditionally a more PC-centric game. This is the first iteration that's being made available to console, which I think is awesome, and I'm willing to sacrifice certain effects so that we can include more of the community, because I like everybody to have fun, right? So it is what it is on that front. But to sum up, it sounds like not much is going to be changing. We may just get hopefully fires and craters in the future. I think that would be good enough. I would really like to see craters within the ground kind of persist. More terrain deformation, maybe even the roads falling apart, and even the stuff that we had, I had mentioned earlier with some of the compositions and the idea between supplies and stuff like that being a, impacting factor. That would be pretty neat. Um, you know, Realistically, buildings are going to be how they are right now. So I think we can all kind of just cumulatively give up on that. But yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts. So definitely shoot some feedback or questions if you want to see me cover something else in a future video that's Arma related, or even if it's not Arma related. I do cover various content on this channel. Really open to hearing any feedback or questions or comments. Generally, I like community engagement, so I'm here for that. But I want to hear your take on this. What do you think about, what we've seen in this video, overall damage? Um, what would you like to see? Do you agree with the changes? Do you not agree with the changes? Or do you just hate destruction in general and would, prefer to keep it as is in Arma? I will say one wrapping thought here before I end the video. I do think they are making strides because, again, remember, it wasn't that many days ago that I posted a video covering 1.3 at an earlier version where we had the insanity where buildings were getting flattened. They listened to the community, they implemented building health, and we're here now. And so without any doubts, I think they're going to keep listening to the community and iterating on this. So I'm kind of excited to see where this gets taken, and I'm definitely excited to see this drop on stable. So with that, I'll thank you with watching, and I'll see you in the next video.